What is up, people? Welcome back to Blue Chip Prospect. Today, I wanted to do a live. I wanted to do a live at 4 p.m. and talk about the trade deadline and come back on the trades and discuss it with you. But when I pressed the live button on YouTube, it said come back in 24 hours. So I didn't know I had to register to do it. I just wanted to try something new and it didn't work. So I guess it's going to be for another time. So I'm going to do it in a podcast style or whatever, just a video discussion style thing where we're just going to be talking about the trade that happened today and the trade that happened in the last couple of days. I want to go back all the way up to like March 1st. But then I looked at all the trade and I was like, well, there was a trade that happened on February 1st, which was Dallas, who traded for Michael Grannon and Cody Cici in exchange for a first round pick and a third round pick that you can see right here. And I feel like this was like the first trade of a playoff team trying to buy a player for a deeper playoff run. Basically, so that was basically where it started. So we're gonna go all the way back there, but everything after that is basically just small trades. So we're not gonna be talking about all the small trade and stuff, just like the big one, and try to see who did good, who did not good. But I think you all know that teams like Dallas and Florida and Toronto and Colorado are like the big winner of the trade deadline, and teams like San Jose just emptied emptied their team. Also, teams like Boston emptied their team. So we're gonna just gonna take a look at that, and it's gonna be a quick little recap. So let's get it. So, but like I said, we already talked about this one, so we're not gonna be talking about it anymore. We're just gonna go up. There's the Rangers who traded to Colorado Ryan Lindgren, which was basically the major player in that trade, in exchange for a second round pick, a fourth round pick, Calvin Dehan and Yusuf Parsonen. Uh, Ryan Lindgren is not a bad player. He's a good player. He used to be like a second line defenseman who blocks a lot of shots. He's still a good defenseman. Is he still a second line? I don't think so. He doesn't bring a lot of offense, but he don't really need it in Colorado with Girard and Makar. So I think he's going to be well suited to play a third pair position, and he's going to be good for them in the playoff. But it's not a big trade or anything like that, and it didn't pay too much compared to what the teams were paying today for players. I think that was that was a fair trade. After that, another team like Florida, they paid obviously this big trade. They paid the first round pick and Spencer Knight for Seth Jones and a fourth round pick. I think in Chicago's case, I think they never thought they would be able to get off of Seth Jones' contract. Somehow they did. They had to retain about a quarter of it, 26% right here. So it makes Seth Jones a $7.5 million, something around that, instead of a 9 point something million dollar. So I think he's worth his contract a lot more now. And playing on a team like the Panthers is gonna help him be good. Like when you play in Chicago and you're being bombarded every night, and like you're basically playing on one of the worst team that was ever assembled. It's obviously it's always every night is gonna be a very hard night. There's no way around it. It's always gonna be a tough night. When you play in Florida and you have all kinds of players around you that can help you. Not only your forwards are good defensively, but you also have Gustav Forsling to help you and players like that. It's gonna be it's just a much better team. Right? They are at complete different places in there. like like obviously Chicago, they're rebuilding, and Florida went to the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row and won last year. So they're not at the same place at all. So it's just gonna help Seth Jones become the player or come back to the player he once was. And I think it's gonna be a really, really good fit. And actually I saw him play a couple of days ago and he was really, really good. So there you go. So that's it for that. I think it's a fair trade, basically. Uh, it's not like a first round pick from Florida. It's gonna be like a 30 first, a 32nd pick. It's it's basically a second round pick. So it's good, but it's nothing fantastic. But then they have Spencer Knight, and Spencer Knight, it's a real tangible like piece. It's a good goalie. It's a goalie that was on the way up, still on the way up, and I think it's going to be a good goalie for Chicago. So they let go of a good guy, a good player. They retained about a quarter of it, but in exchange, they got something good. So it's a fair trade. It's a win-win. And yeah, that's it. To the next one. Obviously, Florida, by trading their goalie, they went to go get another goalie right here. So they got Vitek Vanecek in exchange for Patrick Gillis. Uh, I'm not a big fan of Vanecek. At one point, I think it was in Washington when he was in Washington, or Washington traded for him or something like that. I liked him at that time. I thought he was gonna have a good future. He has not been that great, but it's okay. It's just he's gonna be a backup to Bobrovsky, and obviously in the playoff, it's gonna be Bobrovsky all the way. So it doesn't really matter. It's just to help Bobrovsky play maybe a little bit less games until we get to the playoff. And Vitek Vanecek has some NHL experience. So it's not a bad trade. It's just okay. All right. Then we go to Tampa Bay Lightning, who, like they do all the time, they traded all their picks for a couple players that are non-star player or whatever. Anyways, they got Yanni Gould, which is a good player. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's a bad player or anything like that. It's just that Yanni Gold is Yanni Gold, right? You know what you're getting with him. You're not getting a star player, but you're getting a player that's going to help you offensively, that's going to help you defensively. He's going to be a good player in the playoff. And they get Oliver Georgetown, which is also a good player. He's not a bad player whatsoever, but they paid 2 first-round pick and a second-round pick and Michael Eyisimon. So is that good? I'm not sure. But like Patrice Brisebois said, is it his name Brisebois? Yeah, the GM in Tampa Bay is Brisebois. Sometimes I just forget stuff. And he said that for him, whether you acquire a player with your first round pick or you acquire a player from another team with your first round pick, it's the same thing. You're just getting a player that's going to help you win. And paying the first round pick right now while they get a player for right now instead of getting a player in multiple years that might help you or might not help you. You never know with a first round pick. They're all magic beans basically, especially when they're at the end of the first round. So it's a good trade, but it's a bit much for Yanni Gould and Oliver Bjorkstrand, but whatever they want, they can do. After that, if we jump to the next big trade, which is where? But there's this one. Obviously, there's every year where the Vegas is gonna trade one of their ex first round pick for a player. So now Brendan Brisson is gone for Riley Smith. So basically, you can count on the fact that probably Trevor Connolly is not gonna be there next year. Is gonna be traded for the next Riley Smith or something like that. After that, this one is a big trade. It's a good trade for Colorado, and it's a good trade for the Islanders. Colorado, they got Brock Nelson and William Defoe. Brock Nelson being probably the best center that was available. Uh, a top-notch second line center. He's big. He's powerful. He's just very good player, underrated because the stats are not like you don't look at the stats and he's not a 70 points player, but he's such an underrated player. And they gave for him Callum Ritchie, which is a known certainty. Like it's not just a first round pick; it's a first round pick that is in his draft plus two, and that we know what he's becoming. We know how he has developed in the last 2 years, and he's on the way. He's on the way up, like all the way. So I think that was expensive, but if they can re-sign Brock Nelson, it's gonna. I think it's gonna be fair. If they don't re-sign him and they paid Callum Ritchie a first round pick in 2026, a conditional third round pick, and Oliver Chillington, which we don't really care about, it's very, very expensive. But if they do resign Brock Nelson for a couple years, then it's really worth it because at that point, like Callum Ritchie could become Brock Nelson. There's a slight chance that he's better than Brock Nelson, but there's also a lot of chances that he's worse than Brock Nelson. So this plus a magic bean in 2026, that's all good if you resign Brock Nelson. If you don't, then you just basically you overpaid and like the prospect pool in Colorado is already so thin. Now it's basically empty. So could be a good trade. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a good trade for this year or for the playoff. That's for sure. The only question is it still a good trade next year when if they it's only if they resign him. If they sign him, it's good. If they don't, then it's not good. That's simple. Jake Wallman by the Edmonton Oilers. They paid a first round pick in 2026 too for that for Jake Wallman. I think it's a fair deal. He's been really good. He's been really good in San Jose, and if we consider the prices that people were paying today, like the who is it that paid a second and a third for Luke Shen? Like, if you're gonna pay a second and a third for Luke Shen, you might as well pay a first for Jake Wallman. So I think that was worth it. If you go back up, then there was this trade that I really like for Ottawa, which is sad because I don't like Ottawa, but it's okay. I mean, they they seem to do good trades, but they don't always work out. Like, I was excited for them when they got the Jacob Chikrin. I was excited for them when they got the Brinkat, but none of those trades really worked out for them. So we'll see if the Dylan Cousin worked. But still, they got Dylan Cousin, who's a younger player, a less expensive player, a bigger player, a more well-rounded player, and also overall just a better player, I think. And they paid Josh Norris, who's the opposite, like the older player, the more injury prone player, the like completely different player. Obviously, like Josh Norris is a player that you just need a couple of touches per game to be a threat. Like, he's a shooter. He's a one of the most underrated shooter in the NHL. He could score 30, 35 goals if everything goes well and if his shoulder is fine. But that's the thing, is that he got like 8 surgery in his shoulder, so we don't know if he's gonna come back to what he once was. But nonetheless, he's a good player. But I think Dylan Cousin has more potential, and he was cheaper and younger and bigger and less injury prone. So, and for some reason, Buffalo had to pay a second round pick for that. I don't know how that worked. Ottawa was like, "Hey, I'm giving you the lesser player, but you need to give me a second round pick over that." But Buffalo, being Buffalo, they did what they do best. They developed a player and then traded to somebody else. Basically, that's what they do. So yeah, just that to say to good job, Ottawa. I'm not happy because I don't like Ottawa, but I'm happy because it's a good trade for Ottawa. But anyways, it is what it is. Yeah, like I said here, Luke Shan, second round pick and third round pick. Okay, but at the same time, Winnipeg, it's not like they need much. The team is firing on all cylinders. Like, it's basically two depth pieces. They got Luke Shen and Brendan Tanev. It cost them 2 second round pick and a third round pick. And that was basically all they did. And it's basically all they need to do. Like, they are the best team in the West. And like, what else do you like? There's nothing they need to do. Like, yes, a Rantanen would have helped, like it's gonna help Dallas, but they don't really need it. So I think it was fine for them to just pay this, and they have a lot of prospect and a lot of good prospect that's coming up, and and Winnipeg is they're building. They're not building. They already built something solid, but they also have a lot of good prospect coming up. They're really good, man. They're really well managed team. It's pretty impressive. Outside of that, when you have the Toronto Maple Leafs, who traded for Scott Lawton for a conditional 2027 first round pick and Nikita Gebrenkin. I don't know anything about Nikita Gebrenkin. I mean, I've seen him before when I watch an AHL game, but I never really focused on him, so I know nothing about him. Uh, 2027 first round pick. That's a magic bean at the end of the first round. And they get a player in a style that I think they really need. Fits the team, fits the coach, fits the mentality. It's just the type of player that they need for the playoff. They already have all the talent in the world. They already have Matthews. They already have Nylander, Marner. Like, they don't need more of that. They need more Scott Lawton or players like Matthew Nyes and stuff like that. So Scott Lawton is the guy that's gonna go to the net nonstop. It's the guy that you're gonna need to have a big defender around him at all time, because he's gonna be screening your goalie. He's gonna be pushing around your goalie. You're gonna need somebody to box him out at all times. So it's it's a really good addition. It didn't cost much, and like I said, it's because I don't know the value of Gebrankin, but like I said, if a late first round pick in 2027, like, it's nothing. You don't even have to worry about it, and you're getting a second line center. So yeah, I think that's fine. It's a good trade for Toronto, which again makes me sad too. When Ottawa and Toronto are doing good, it's always a sad time. It's always a sad time, but it is what it is. Next one, and that was the big trade, is Mikko Rantanen to Dallas in exchange for Logan Stankoven, a two first round pick, one in 2026, one in 2028, and two third round pick, one in 2026 and one in 2027. Basically, the way I think of it, like if you forget everything, you just take each trade that happened on its own, like apart from everything else. Like Mikko Rantanen versus Logan Stankoven is worth more than, like, the difference between those two players is more than just two magic bean at the end of the first round, right? It's like, what are the chances that of those four pick, you get players that equal the difference between Rantanen and Stankoven? Like those chances are like 5%. So it's a really really good trade for Dallas, but it's also a really really good trade for the Carolina Hurricanes. Not a really really good trade in their case. It's more like, value wise, it's good because you get Stankoven, who was a player that we all thought was going to compete for the Calder at the beginning of the year. It didn't happen, but it doesn't mean he's not good. He's still a little bulldog with tons of skills, but he's a 5'8" player. So it's always something you have to take into consideration. Like, it's like in Montreal, we have Caulfield. He's 30 plus goal scorer. He's doing really, really well. He's still a 5'8" player. Once you come to the playoff, he's going to help you, but there are points where he's going to be a negative value on the ice. So it's the same thing for Logan Stankoven. Uh, but the thing is, they traded Nikash, and then they got Mikko Rantanen. And then Mikko Rantanen, after 13 games, it didn't work. And they jumped from Nikash to Rantanen to Logan Stankoven. So it's like, like for this year and probably next year, they are in a worse position. Like, they would need to use those first round picks and third round picks to acquire a player, but they did not do that. So this year, they just got worse and they got smaller. Like, not it's not good for the playoff. You can't get smaller and get worse before the playoff and expect to do great things. It's not gonna work. You cannot have Jordan Stahl and Kakaniemi as your second line center. It's not gonna work. It's just logic. So they're gonna need to do something with that. But in the process, they got the value that they needed, but they got worse for this year and probably next year, unless they do a trade in the summer or something like that. So it's good value wise, but hockey wise, it's terrible. So depends how they see it. But to me, I mean, if you jump from Nikash to Rantanen and to Rantanen to Stankoven, and that's what you're going to the playoff with, you made a mistake somewhere. Along the ride, there's something where you made a mistake, because it's pretty significant drop. But for Dallas, Mikko Rantanen, I mean, they get one of the best winger in the game. They sign him for 8 years at $12 million a year, which is, like, it's not like a fantastic deal or anything like that. Like, it's a good deal. 12 million for Rantanen. I would do it on my team anytime, but it's not a steal. But in the process of signing him for 8 years at $12 million, they also signed Wyatt Johnston at 8.4 million for the next 5 years. So, like, their team is stacked and their team is signed. Like, they have Hins, who signed at 8 point something. Uh, they have Marchman at 4.5. Who's the other one? Like, I always forget everything. But anyways, they have all kinds of players that are signed. Like, they also on defense, they have High Scannon at 8 point something. Um Jesus, why I don't remember their team. Now, let's go here. I'm gonna go look. And at the second I have a mic in front of me, like, I can't talk. If I try to do anything at the same time, or I try to just speak my mind, if there's a mic in front of me, I just can't see it. I just forget everything. There you go. Robertson 7.75, Hintz 8.4, Rantanen is going to be 12 million, Marchman 4.5, Johnson's going to be 8.4. It's like, it's all expensive players, but they're all worth their money and more. I think Wyatt Johnston, he's 21 years old, is almost a point per game. Like, man, 8.4 for the next 5 years. That guy's gonna be worth like 11 or $12 million by the end of his contract. So it's really, really good. They're they're amazing. Dallas is doing such a good job. It's incredible. So yeah, that's it for that trade. And if we keep going, then there's Colorado, they traded for Brock Nelson for the second line center, and obviously they couldn't take their actual second line center in Casey Middlestat, move it to the third line, and expect him to be a good checker center. It's not gonna work. He's a finesse guy. He's an offensive playmaking type of guy. Pretty soft. So the, they understood that they couldn't get Casey Middlestat to match up against the first line on the other side and expect him to shut them down, right? So they traded for him. They traded for him. They traded him to get Charlie Coyle, and Charlie Coyle is going to fit exactly what they want from their third line center, and that's where he's going to be locked in. But even though they gave the better player, because Casey Middlestat offensively is a better player than Charlie Coyle. But even though they gave the better player, they had to pay one of their best prospect and also a second round pick. So they paid a lot to get Charlie Coyle because teams understand that in the playoff, you're not gonna go win with your Casey Middlestat. Like if you have to have a Casey Middlestat on your third line, it's gonna be really, really hard to win. I think you can see that I don't really like Casey Middlestat, so there's that. But it's like saying I'm gonna have Trevor Zegras on my third line and I'm gonna hope to go compete, and probably not. It's not gonna work that way. So I think it's a good move, even though they paid a lot for it. It's a good move. And outside of that, after that, the Boston Bruins, they keep emptying their team. They traded Brad Marchand, who's the icon of the team, the captain of the team, and they like it still says to be determined. And even if I refresh, maybe now they put it in, but they did not. Not still to be determined. But from what I've seen on Twitter, they paid like a is it like a second round pick that could turn into a first round pick if the conditions are met or something like that, which is nothing for Brad Marchand, right? But I mean, for the Panthers, it's amazing. Like they're doing such a great job of getting more players with Seth Jones, Nico Sturm, Vitek Vanecek because they traded the Spencer Knight, and then they get Brad Marchand, and they're already one of the top team in the NHL. Like they're probably on their way to a third year in a row and the final in the Stanley Cup final. It's just amazing. So for Boston, I don't I don't think I would have done it for a second round pick or a first round pick alone. I don't think I would have done it. It's like Brad Marchand is too important to the soul of the team. He's too good of a player to I don't know to trade him for a first. But that's not my decision. So it is what it is. And on the other hand, just after they traded Brendan Carlo to the Leafs, and they got more for Carlo than they did for Marchand. I know he's signed for another like 2 or 3 years, but they got Fraser Minton, which is basically Toronto, maybe not best prospect, but the most NHL ready prospect, and they got a first round pick over that. And they retained 15% on Carlo's salary. I think that's an amazing trade for Boston. Uh, Whenever one or the other loses a trade, I'm happy, but now it's one against the other, so it's I can't really. But I don't know. Brendan Carlo for Fraser Minton in the first round pick. I'm not sure. Like Brendan Carlo was pretty good. He's like a second line, a second pair defenseman. Sometimes he looks like a second pair defenseman, but sometimes he doesn't look like a second pair defenseman at all. So it really depends which Brendan Carlo they're gonna get. Are they gonna get the good one? Are they gonna get the meh one? We'll see. But they paid a lot for it, no matter what. No matter the version of Brendan Carlo they get, they still paid a lot for it, in my opinion. That was a lot. After that, Shea Weber to Utah. Okay. Boston just emptying. No, that's not emptying. Fabian Zetterlund, that's pretty good for Ottawa again. They paid Noah Gregor and stuff like that, which is nothing. And I think that's basically it, right? Yeah. Like the rest, like Mark Jarkansky, Jankowski, and stuff like that. It's not really anything important. And obviously, I'm a Habs fan, so let's talk about the Habs. And the Habs did nothing, which is good in a way. and bad in a way. Like I they are 1 point or 2 point away from the playoff, which is exactly where they wanted them at the beginning of the season. They said in March we want them to be playing meaningful hockey, and they absolutely are. So it, the minimum they could have done is do what they did today. Like, don't take players away from them. They re-signed Evans last week or this week, which is really good. They signed him under $3 million for 4 or 5 years. So overall, the deal is good. Evans a good player, top PK player in the NHL. It's all good. That part is done. It's good. And they could have traded Vorak, they could have traded Armia, they could have traded Savard, and they did not touch any of those players. Like Vorak is best friend with Caulfield, so you don't want to scrap that energy. Same thing with Armia's, like he's amazing on the PK for us, so we absolutely need him if we want to keep competing. And Savard, even though like he can't skate anymore, he's still a presence on the ice. He's still a presence on in the locker room. So I can understand because at best you were getting a second round pick for Savard, and at best you were getting a second round pick for Armia. And what would you get for Dvorak? I don't know. The guy cannot complete anything. So so it's either you get like a second round pick for those players, or you give them a chance to keep battling to get to the playoff. And in my opinion, I think the best thing to do when you're trying to rebuild, it's stop breaking it down every single year. And when they are competing, when they are where you wanted them to be, and they showed you that they are getting better, well, you let them get better, and like you let them compete together and learn as a team how to fight to be a playoff team. Yeah, first I have to learn to fight to get to the playoff, and then you have to learn how to fight in the playoff and how to get to the final and how to win in the final. Like it's a process, and it's like we're in the first step of the process of learning how to get to the playoff. But if you just take players out, let's say you take off Borak out, you take off Armia out, and you take off Sava out, the team is done. Like it's possible that they're done even if we don't do that. But what I'm saying is that if you do that, they are done. That you don't give them a chance to fight. And I think it was the right call. Even though like some people really want those second round pick and stuff like that, I can understand it. When you're in a rebuild, you want as much pick as possible. This is what San Jose is doing. This is what Chicago is doing. I think the Habs are trying to rebuild at the same time they're trying to teach them how to win, and I think it's definitely the right way to go. So I'm fine with that. I would have liked to maybe get like, Ottawa got Cousins. I think Cousins is a better player than what he's been in Buffalo, but basically every player are better players than what they are in Buffalo. So it's just I don't know what we could have offered because they still got an NHL player that could be a 50, 60 point player, or a player that can score 30, 35 goals a year. So it's not like he's a nothing burger. He's a good player. He's a second line center that has a terrific shot and doesn't need much to be a dangerous player. So I think they wanted to do a hockey trade more than a future trade because the Habs, we didn't have player to spare. We couldn't trade. First, Kirby Doc is not even close to Norris. Kirby Doc is minus 29. Kirby Doc hasn't been good since last season. Like this season, he showed nothing. Like it's not looking good for Kirby Doc, right? He could come back next year and grow and be better, and all of a sudden we have our second line center. But those chances they get smaller and smaller, like as close as we get to that, right? So. So yeah, so Kirby Dak was not the solution. Like you could not call Buffalo and say we're gonna give you Kirby Dak, you give us Cousins, and there you go. No, it's not gonna work. Kirby Dak has been terrible. So no, we can't do that. Same thing for New Hook. New Hook, like he has a role with the Habs. I think he's not a bad player by any means. He's a very fast player. He's very competitive. He uses his speed very well. Uh, he's not a bad player, but he's not offensive enough, and he doesn't bring enough to really get you a player like Cousins. So basically, the Habs would have need to trade like a mix of futures and maybe a roster player. But if we take off a roster player, we're not getting much better, and we can't trade Dog because he's injured. So basically, it's only future. So you trade like a first round pick and maybe Michael Hage, or maybe they tell you Michael Hage and a second round pick. Like personally, I would trade Michael Hage and a second round pick like that for to get Cousins, because you get a 6'4" center that's good offensively, good defensively, that has proven that he's capable to reach. Like he scored 68 points literally 2 years ago, so it's not like it's impossible for him to get back there. I just think it's, the Buffalo environment that's just killing him. And I think he's going to be much better than that in Ottawa. And I think he would have been much better than that in Montreal too. And I think it would have been worth it to pay a player like Hage and a second round pick, or Hage and a first round pick, or Mayu and a first round pick, or whatever they want. But I don't think that's what they wanted. I think they wanted an actual player, an actual hockey trade, and not just futures again and again and again. So that's it. That's pretty much it for today. That was just a little round out about the trade deadline, and wanted to talk about what I thought the Habs did or did not do and how I felt about it. Overall, I'm happy. I think everything is going well. We're competing. And we didn't do any stupid trade where we paid a first and a second and this and that for a third line center or something like that. So all of this is good. And that's it. Just a quick recap. Hope you liked it. See you in the next one. Peace.